I'm going to let Don do the um, bio of our speaker, Professor Ron Rychlak. It's pretty impressive, and I think Don will do it justice. So Don, you want to take this?
Thank you, President Gene. It's a pleasure to be here with all my brother friars. And it's an honor and a privilege to be introducing Ron Rychlak to the friars for, I believe it's the second time he's spoken. I also had him speak to the Thomas More Society. I think he's been there 3 times. And he's always an impressive speaker. I have to tell you, I asked my assistant to print out, to download and print out his full bio without knowing that it is 19 pages long. And that's not, I'm not kidding. It's 19 pages long, single spaced, and it's all the articles and the accomplishments that this man has on his record. Let me condense it a bit and tell you that Ron's a professor of law, which is a very big deal, is at a tremendous school at Ole Miss, and but he's also he has a chair. He holds a chair at the law school there, and that's a huge deal for a guy as young as Professor Ron is. And he's been on the faculty there since 1987, and he has served as the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. And since 2007, he's been the university's faculty athletic representative. And it's amazing to me the background that this guy has, the deep background that Professor Ron has in several different areas. He's one of the leading experts in the United States on gaming law, and he's one of the top guys with the Southeastern Conference related to athletics, and he's recognized by the Vatican as one of the experts on several areas. He's a 4th degree knight. I wanted to tell you, his family was named as the Knights of Columbus State Family of the Year for 1999 and to 2000 for the state of Mississippi. I have to tell you, anybody who can be as involved with as many things as Professor Ron is involved with and still have a family at that level. I mean, all of us who are knights understand how busy Catholic men can be. Well, this is a man who's busy, but he's also, as like one of the lawyers I used to work for when I was in law school used to say, cream always rises to the top. It doesn't matter what he has done. He has been one of the guys that rose to the top. Now, just as an aside, for those of you who saw the movie Blind Spot, remember about the football player who was brought into the family, and they helped him get to the point where he was able to go to college and play football. The name is Michael Orr, and he played at Mississippi, and which is where Professor Rychlak is the faculty representative for the football team. And you know, tough job to be a faculty representative to a top football program. And so when I mentioned that to a friend of mine, he said, so I bet he was able to help him out a lot with his academics. And I said, well, actually, I think, yeah, you're right. Michael helped him with one of his recent articles that he submitted on behalf of the Vatican. So I want to limit the number of wisecracks I make about my good friend, Professor Ron. We're going to have use of our screen share today, right, President Gene?
Yes, we are. And whenever the professor is ready, and I got to interject, Professor, those kind of backgrounds always make me feel, I get depressed because I feel like I squandered my life. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, I want to say one last thing. When I hear President Gene say that, I got to tell you guys, and I've mentioned this before in Gene's presence to embarrass him, but for a number of years, I used to take scouts into his office when he was a police captain in Orange for the Law and Merit badge. And they would sit there and grill him about the stuff in his background. And I never forget one of the kids who went in because he wanted to become a police officer. But after hearing the background that Gene has, very, very diversified background in terms of the number of courses that he's taken and the number of certificates that he's gotten and his degrees. He said, I don't think I want to be a police officer anymore. I don't want to work that hard. So I understand what you meant about Professor Ron, but Gene, you got the same kind of background. So keep it to yourself, bud.
Thank you, Don. I appreciate that. All right, Professor, whenever you're ready, we'll let you take it away. And Denny, you going to be able to share that screen?
I think so.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks both of you guys, and thanks everybody for having me out here. It's always fun to hear people try and figure out how I did all that work. With the 6 kids, I just stayed at the office, and my wife took care of it. Actually, my youngest, we give her a hard time because we were named Family of the Year when we had 5, and she came along, and it hasn't happened since. So it's but talking about athletics, seriously. I just got off. I chair our athletics committee here at Ole Miss, and we had a meeting that went up till 15 minutes ago. So I'm kind of back to back. I just caught the end of mass for that reason. Also, I took my mom to Taco Bell for lunch today. Just the stream of consciousness of things. In the movie, they point out that Sean Toohey, that's the character of the father. I mean, it's a true story. John Toohey was a basketball star, but the family that adopted Michael Orr, the father, played by Tim McGraw in the movie, owns a bunch of Taco Bells. So I took my mom to Taco Bell for lunch. So it's all one happy family here at Ole Miss. Things are good. But my most interesting work, certainly professionally, has been with the church and has been with the my work on Pope Pius XII and the history of Pope Pius XII, and that's why I'm here today. And I will, if I can get this figured out here. I'm going to see if I can share my screen, and if I can do that. Host participant screen, you got it disabled. You're going to have to reset it to allow. And so there's been a lot of interesting stuff. They've recently opened some archives at the Vatican. I was supposed to get to go and look at them in June this past summer, but it was closed down because of coronavirus. So I postponed my trip, but I'm hoping to go to Rome and look at the new archives as soon as things are open. I've done some the Catholic League. I don't know if you've done this. I've written some about the new archives for the Catholic League, which has a webpage. You can access everything with stuff I've written on Pius XII for them is available there. And they've got some stuff about the newest things about the newest archives as well.
Professor, I assume somebody maintains all those archives and really has a good handle on where everything is there, because I hear it's just huge.
It absolutely is, and and it's taken forever. I mean, these have been sealed really since about World War II, and there's been a lot of pressure to try to get them open. One of the reasons it's taken so long is they want to make sure absolutely to index and archive and reference and know what you have, because I've been studying this, I guess now for 25 years or so. And in those 25 years, there have been 2 serious things. Once where people claimed to have gotten documents from an archive and they were not. They could later verify they were not in the archive, but they made the Pope look bad. People said we found these archival documents. They were not in fact archival. And then there's another time where people tried to slide something into an archive and put in a document to make the Pope look bad. And turns out it was not a legitimate document. And because of their careful indexing and record keeping, they were able to prove that both times. But there are people, and there's an aspect of the story I might not get to, so I'm going to go ahead, since I don't have the slides about it, I'll start telling you about it now. In 2013, I co-authored this book. It's called Disinformation with Ian Mihai Pacepa. He was the head of foreign intelligence for communist Romania, and he worked very closely with the leaders in the Kremlin for the purpose of discrediting religion in general, the Catholic Church, the papacy, and specifically they focus on Pope Pius XII. There was an active active directive to try to create chaos and confusion and doubt about Pope Pius XII, not because they cared about Pius particularly, but because if you can associate any pope with the Nazis, you bring discredit not only on that pope, but on the papacy, on the church, on Christianity, on religion itself. And they did this not only with Pius XII. If you look, Cardinal Wyszynski in Poland, Cardinal Mindszenty in Croatia, Stepanek in Croatia, Wyszynski in Poland, but there were several high-ranking Catholic officials who were claimed to have been associated with the Nazis. And it was really just because the Soviet sphere had suddenly brought in Poland and Hungary and Romania. And they needed to de-Christianize those areas. And so in nation after nation, you saw these campaigns to suggest that the local Catholic leaders had collaborated with the Nazis. And that's how they tried to de-Christianize these heavily Catholic areas. And they actually tried to do that with the Pope in about 1945-46. It didn't go anywhere. They couldn't control things because the Pope was in Rome instead of being able to control the courts like they did for these other leaders. But as soon as he died, so Pius XII died in 1958. By 1960, well, they were actually working on it before then. By 1963, the play The Deputy, which is really at the core of the attack against Pius XII, was produced in Berlin. It's on Broadway in 64. And what Pachepa revealed, and he wrote a little column about it. And I've been studying this for such a long time. I started thinking, could this possibly be true? And I spent 2 years researching to figure out what Pachepa says, is that true? Could it be that the Kremlin, in fact, created this whole myth of Pius XII being sympathetic to the Nazis? And I'm there on our kitchen table talking to my wife going, look, I've written a book. I've already got the Vatican and the Nazis. Do I really need to bring the Kremlin in? You got to put me in a corner with a tinfoil hat. But after about 2 years, I realized it made everything understandable. All the stuff that didn't make sense made sense when you realize there was a political motivation to try to create this misperception about a pope who everybody during the war and after the war, and I'm talking about Jewish leaders and rescuers and righteous Gentiles, and everybody pointed to and said that he was the one man. 2 editorials, 1941 and 42, Christmas Day, in the New York Times, said he was the one man in all of Europe who was standing up against the Nazis, who was pointing his finger at Hitler, who was protecting the Jews. That was a universal perception until the greatest disinformation organization known to the world, and that would be the Soviet disinformation machine from the Kremlin, decided to attack him and create this false narrative. And that's the game changer. That's the piece that when Pachepa and I published this book in 2013, nobody believed. By last year, we're at the UN panel. Every major pro-Pius scholar from around the world, from Rome, from Paris, several from the United States, trying to think what other nations were involved. I know all those nations were involved. Embraced that as fact now. That it's well established that this was a massive disinformation campaign. It wasn't just something that, because if you think about it, you don't go from everybody knows editorials in the New York Times, the one man standing alone, the guy who's doing all this, and then you don't discover something to conclude he was actually silent, because that's the narrative if you don't understand the disinformation campaign. Everybody knew where he was to, wait a minute, we don't know where he was. You can't discover something and figure that out. You know, if people knew it, they don't lose that information.
Hey,
But you
Professor, I
can
think you may
create.
be okay to go on now. Can you're the host, so
Oh,
can you
okay.
try
I would
sharing
love
your
to,
screen?
yeah. This will stop. Okay, yeah, this will stop others, but that's great. There we go. Share. There we go. All right. Let me get bigger and slideshow from start. And
There we
Don
go.
mentioned this book, Righteous Gentiles, which was really my second book on Pius XII. My first book I'd written was Hitler, the War, and the Pope. And Hitler, the War, and the Pope tried to lay out, here's what happened, and not engage in the debates. And it came out, Hitler, the War, and the Pope, and everybody started debating, pushing back. Let's see, I'm gonna make sure how I advance. There we go. That was Hitler, the War, and the Pope. And I kept having to write essays responding to everybody. And Michael Novak, passed away now, but became a great friend. Michael Novak encouraged me. He said, you need to take all of your responses to these people and put them in a new book. So instead of just Hitler, the War, and the Pope tried to be, here's what happened. Righteous Gentiles was engaging in the debate, engaging in the argument. In some ways, it makes it more of a defensive book a little bit, Righteous Gentiles, because I'm accepting his arguments against them. I tried not to do that in Hitler, the War, and the Pope. Was here's what happened. So Righteous Gentiles came out simultaneous with the Myth of Hitler's Pope. Rabbi David Dallin. David became a good friend too. David actually reviewed 10 books about Pius XII for a magazine, and he concluded Hitler, War, and the Pope was the best. And so I became a great fan. I really appreciated him. It was a very nice review out of 10 recent books. It was the best. But then he brought out the Myth of Hitler's Pope simultaneously at the same time my book, Righteous Gentiles, came out. And there is either the first book by a Jewish rabbi praising Pius XII, or a second book by a Catholic author defending Pius XII. His book got all the attention and kind of knocked Righteous Gentiles off the shelf when it came out. But it's a good book too. Although if you look at his footnotes, a lot of them are to Hitler, the War, and the Pope. But let's talk about kind of the story. Let's lay it out so you understand. And I'll take questions at the end. But if you got a question in the middle, just speak up and stop and ask me a question. But trying to understand Pius XII, you go back to the office where he worked at the Vatican in 1916, where a group of Jews from Poland wrote a letter to the Vatican and asked about the anti-Semitism that they were experiencing. This letter comes back from Pius XII's office. It appears he wrote it, but I mean, it's technically from the office, not from him. The Catholic Church considers all men as brothers, teaches them to love one another. This law must be observed and respected in the case of children of Israel as well as of all others. In 1917, Eugenio Pacelli, the future Pius XII, was sent to Rome, sent to Germany from Rome to try to bring an end to World War I. Pope Benedict gave him a peace plan, and he tried to meet with leaders and negotiate something. It didn't end the war, although it ended a couple years later on pretty much those same terms. But he stayed there. He stayed and he helped the people who were suffering from the war, the prisoners of war. He helped people who had been dislocated. There are a lot of pictures of him handing out supplies and stuff in Germany at that time. And he's actually located in Munich, which is the same town that Adolf Hitler returns to after World War II. So if you think of world history, you've got this interesting intersection where the future Pope and the future dictator are in the same city. And in fact, Pius XII watched the rise of the Nazis as this time. The Nazis have come back. I mean, they weren't Nazis yet, but the future Nazis, the followers of Hitler, come back, and they feel like the rug got pulled out from underneath them. They thought they should win the war. They thought that there was capitulation that should not have happened. They come back, their economy is in shambles. There are no jobs. They're hanging around the street corners, drinking and fighting and creating, and it was that situation that led to the rise of Hitler. Wild inflation hit the place. There was a brief communist takeover of Bavaria. This is a copy of a comic book back from the 1950s where a group of communists actually went in to Pacelli's nunciature where he was staying, held him. He was held at gunpoint. The house was sprayed with machine gun fire one particular time. They stole his car while he was here. They threw something and bent the pectoral cross. And I always heard that story. I didn't know if that was really true. And then I'm watching some old tapes of Father Sheen, Bishop Sheen, and he talks about he has the cross. Pius XXII gave him the cross. So that apparently, in fact, had happened. 1923, Pacelli writes to Rome, talking about the right-wing radicals and the followers of Hitler and Ludendorff, who were creating problems by persecuting both Jews and Catholics. And he specifically singled out some Catholic bishops who were setting a good example by standing up for the Jews. So this guy who's criticized for allegedly being an anti-Semite recognized the threat Hitler posed very early. In fact, while he was in Germany, we have a record of 44 public speeches that he gave. 40 of them attacked ideas fundamental to National Socialism, ideas like racism, extreme nationalism, things that were developing into Nazi ideology. 1929, he is called back to Rome. This is actually from him getting ready to get on the train to go back to Rome. And he left Germany in 29, never returned back to Germany. He was made Cardinal Secretary of State in 1930, where Pope Pius XI said, Cardinal Pacelli speaks with my voice. A lot of the critics, not all of them, but a lot of critics will try to draw a contrast between Pius XI, who supposedly is a good guy, and Pius XII, who is not as outspoken, not as confrontational. And he wasn't as they agreed in the pre-war era. Pius XII takes over in the war era, and the era necessitates certain changes in the way things take place. Sorry, there we go. 33. So Pacelli becomes Secretary of State in 30. 33, Hitler is elected chancellor. He's promising work and food. One of the things that's often overlooked when people think about, they think about Nazism, they think about fascism, they overlook the actual name of National Socialism. Hitler believed in nationalism. Hitler also believed in socialism. As late as the 1960s, if you surveyed German people, a lot of them pointed to the 1930s as a glorious era because, he provided for free vacations and a lot of benefits and things, handed out a lot of stuff because he engaged in tremendous deficit spending. He didn't, he expected to repay whatever if he was going to repay anything, he would repay it through captured goods or by taking things from people, that he didn't plan to pay back. There were very socialistic programs he put in place. It's kind of interesting to look at this election. This is from the 1934 census. You see the Catholic population is dark here in Germany, and then you've got Bavaria up in the right. I like to look at that little triangle in Bavaria in particular, because the dark here represents Catholic. The dark here represents the areas where the National Socialist voting was most strong. I'm just going to click back and forth a couple times so you can see. Dark is Catholic, dark is National Socialism. So Germany was about 1/3 Catholic, about 2/3. It's the home of Protestantism, certainly with Martin Luther, Lutheranism. But even that little triangle up Bavaria, the dark area did not, which was Catholic, did not support the Nazi vote. So, I mean, it's a very telling map, I think, to look at where the support was. Big controversy that people point back to. This is one of the things I talk about in more in Righteous Gentiles than I did in Hitler, the War, and the Pope, because Pius XI didn't really like didn't like Catholic political parties. There had been in a number of nations Catholics basically forming political parties to advance their agenda. Pius XI preferred the idea of having agreements or concordats or treaties and working with the governments instead of trying to have a political party. And throughout the 1920s, Pacelli, on behalf of the Vatican, tried to get a concordat with Germany, with the Soviet Union. He did not get, for the most part, Weimar would not accept the proposals from the Vatican. Some individual states did. Several individual states within Germany signed concordats or agreements. And really around the world. In 1929 in Italy, and there was one in France as well. There were a lot of these concordat agreement kind of things. But this is the one that people will point to and argue about, because in 1933, Pacelli, on behalf of the Vatican, signs a concordat with Germany. And it's with Germany. It's not with the Nazis. It's with Germany. But Hitler had taken over by now. It remained in place after the Nazis were out of power, which is why I say it's with Germany, not with a political party. But in essence, what happened was the Vatican had this proposal on the floor waiting for trying to get Weimar to agree to it, and Weimar wouldn't agree. Hitler comes to power, and Hitler's trying to secure up his base and make himself look good, and he says, let's take this deal, the one the Vatican has already offered to Germany. And there were people who cautioned against doing it, but Pacelli wrote a letter back to Rome that said basically, we had a pistol pointed to our head. It was accept these terms, which we had proposed, by the way, accept our own terms, or they were going to strangle the church in Germany. So Pacelli signs a document carrying out the policies of Pius XI, and you get people arguing that somehow Pacelli did something wrong in doing this. John Cornwell, the guy who wrote Hitler's Pope, which is the big critical book of Pius XII, he's kind of almost funny the way he does it. He says that Pacelli signed it, but then he also says that when it was later used for some good purposes, because it was, that Pacelli gets no credit for that. He's got a double whammy there. A lot of the folks. Okay, so by the way, the Palestine Post. This is so what's today the Jerusalem Post points out that although there was a pact, it's signed by you have to attribute it to the Pope, number one, a Pope who most people think is a good Pope, not by the underlings who technically signed it. That's one of the things. But the Palestine Post recognized that Jews must be treated with Christian charity. They recognize it that way. A lot of critics will say, well, this was the first thing that gave Hitler international recognition. Not really. Hitler had already signed the Four Powers Pact between Germany, Great Britain, France, and Italy. He'd been granted a seat at the League of Nations. He'd signed a Soviet trade agreement and had renewed a UK friendship agreement. So the world was recognizing this regime. Yeah, I mean, he certainly wanted the recognition of signing any international agreement he could, and to that extent, the Holy See's agreement played, to his advantage. But I don't see how you can blame that on Pacelli, and I don't really blame Pius XI either. This was something they thought they were trying to do, and they had a pistol pointed at their head. And by the way, even a month before the Concordat was ratified, Jews in Palestine signed an agreement endorsed by the World Zionist Conference about allowing Jewish people to move to Palestine. So a lot of critics try to argue that the Holy See really recognized Nazi Germany. I just think that's nonsense. In fact, the Vatican, very early after the Concordat was signed, began filing protests of violations of the Concordat, including when Nazis announced a boycott of Jewish shops. That was formally protested by the Vatican as a violation. In fact, this was the very first protest as a violation of the Concordat. So, I think it's a false argument, a false narrative that gets made way too often. In fact, the Nazis recognized that the Holy See was their enemy. You see Goring here. Catholic believers carry away but one impression from attendance at divine services, and that is that the Catholic Church rejects the institutions of the nationalist state. And here we have a cartoon. You've got the priest, and he's got his nose buried in the newspaper, which say you can read politics, right? And priest is too concerned about politics, so concerned that he's supposed to be taking care of his lambs, but he's not paying attention, and the swine have devoured his lambs. That's in Das Schwarzkorps, the official SS newspaper. So they're ridiculing the church, saying the church by getting in politics, and that's what the Nazis said. Whenever the church came to the defense of Jews, they said, that's a political issue. You're supposed to stay out of that. If you get into it, that's what's going to happen here. In 1935, Cardinal Pacelli, writing to Cardinal Schultz, referred to the Nazis as false prophets with the pride of Lucifer, called them plagiarists as well. So he wasn't attracted to them, and he wasn't mistaken about them. I think it's fair to question the church whether every political move was appropriate, whether they did the right thing in negotiating. I mean, I think, historians and politicians and such should examine such things. But the critics, the people who write the books critical of the church, always say there's a bad motivation there. And that's what I think does not exist. They've not carried that at all. In 1937, Pacelli travels to France. And here's how the Das Schwarzkorps reports it. First of all, it's Pacelli. It says his name. It looks like his face. He's got his arm around a woman, which you're not supposed to do if you're a priest, first of all. Secondly, she has the facial characteristics that the Nazis always used to depict a Jew. So he's got his arm around a Jewish woman. She's holding Humanité, which is a communist newspaper, so a communist Jewish woman. It says the Cardinal's journey to France across the top, and then the thing at the bottom, she's certainly not pretty, but she can cook. And if you look at back there, you can even tell anti-Nazi on the recipe. So again, the Nazis recognize Pacelli as an enemy. Not only it's not a neutral thing. They're singling him out. It's not even about the church. They're singling him out as an enemy of the Nazis. And then probably the strongest encyclical ever written against a political party, a regime, let's say, Mit brennender Sorge, which came out from Pius XI, but which was penned by two principals, and one of them was Pacelli. So Pacelli is one of the principal co-authors of this encyclical from 1937, which was released not in Rome like usual. Rather, it was distributed throughout Germany by a bunch of folks on bicycles who took it around on Palm Sunday, where it was read out loud. And they said it took about 2 hours, Mass took about 2 hours that Palm Sunday, because they read this encyclical that talked about superficial minds, that spoke of a national God or national religion, tried to talk about extreme racialism, like the Nazis did. And then immediately the Nazis retaliated. They confiscated all copies of this. They smashed printing presses. They made sure it was not seen or heard again within Germany until after the fall of the Nazism. But I mean, very strong anti-Nazi statement. And it was published in German instead of Latin. Published in German. Very clearly directed, trying to make sure that no one misunderstood where the church stood, where the Pope stood. And you can see immediately the Nazis suppressed the message. And they argued that the church argued that it broke the Concordat as well. 1938, Hitler comes to visit his buddy Mussolini in Rome. And this is really pretty fascinating because, for one thing, Pope Pius XI and Pacelli left Rome. They went to Castel Gandolfo, the papal summer home, a month earlier than they usually went in the summer, but they left a month earlier to avoid this. Pius XI said the air in Rome makes me ill. Years ago, I had a debate with Susan Zuccotti, an author of another book critical of the Pope. She said it wasn't to protest Hitler's arrival. It was the Pope was feeling ill. I don't even believe she couldn't really have meant that. They left orders behind because Rome got all decorated. Rome welcomed Hitler. There were parties. I actually got a letter that a priest who was in seminary wrote back to his parents, and my mom gave to my mom gave to me, about how Rome certainly does brown up well, because there were parties and celebrations. They left orders at the Vatican to go dark. They ordered that priests and nuns not participate in any of the festivities. They had to reroute Hitler's parade because Hitler loved to go past historical stuff, and he's going to go certainly past the Vatican. You watch when he goes into Paris. He's touring all of the sites, and there's film. I used to, when I was working on this book, I would watch the History Channel all the time. My wife called it NTV, all Nazis all the time, because I was always watching Nazi shows. We spent about a year with the Nazi books on our dining room table. My wife was always telling me that someone was going to come in and get the wrong idea. But there are no films of Hitler going through the Sistine Chapel or through St. Peter's Basilica. He wasn't allowed to do that because the Vatican didn't cooperate. And in order to avoid embarrassing him, Mussolini changed the parade route so it wouldn't go past the dark Vatican. Shortly before he passed away, Pope Pius XI made a profound statement. Mark well that in the Catholic Mass, Abraham is our patriarch and forefather. Anti-Semitism is incompatible with the lofty thought which that fact expresses. It is a movement with which we Christians can have nothing to do. No, I say to you, it is impossible for a Christian to take part in anti-Semitism. Spiritually, we're all Semites. About 2 weeks later, Pacelli repeated the same talk in Rome in front of a different audience. So when he passed away, the world, Pius XI had made clear he thought Pacelli should be the next pope. It's one of the reasons he sent Pacelli and traveled around the world. They had this funeral for Pius XI, and delegations from around the world came and gave their condolences to the hierarchy within the Vatican, except for the Germans. And when the German group came by, they instead gave a lecture. They said the last pope could not see the future. He could not see the way things are progressing and taking place. You need to have a different kind of pope next time, a pope we can work with. It was understood, it was written in the paper, it's understood they meant not Pacelli. And when Pacelli got elected, delegations from around the world came for the coronation in Germany. Germany boycotted it. They did not show up. You see what the Berlin Morgan Post says, what the Reich says. You've elected a political pope. They understood this was a slap in the face to the Germans. They were wise to realize that this is Pacelli's first encyclical, October 39. This is 6 weeks before the outbreak of World War II. It's with, the building military just north of Italy. He does Darkness Over the Earth, Somni Pontificatus. Pope, and this is the New York Times headline, Pope condemns dictators, treaty violators, racism, urges restoring of Poland. I mean, dictators, Hitler, treaty violators, Hitler, racism, Hitler, urging restoring of Poland, which has just been debated, right? So the Germans understood that the church had elected an opponent of theirs. And if you look at some of the headlines from early in the papacy, and I used a green highlighter doing my early research 25 years ago, and didn't know that these things were going to end up being slides for me this far in the future, but you can see January 1940, Vatican denounces atrocities in Poland, Germans called even worse than Russians. This is from the Jewish this really is the Jerusalem Post today. It was the Palestine Post at the time. But January of 1940, Nazi atrocities in Poland held a front to mankind in Vatican broadcast. The Vatican radio was used a lot. 1940 March, Pope is emphatic about just peace, Jews' rights defended. One of the really, by the way, another really great book in this area is Mark Riebling's book, Church of Spies, where he explains something. And I had come across some evidence of this, which I put in my book, but I kind of buried it into a footnote because I just wasn't sure enough. Riebling nails it down more completely. But Pius XII cooperated with the Bonhoeffer group that's featured in Valkyrie, the effort to assassinate Hitler. There was this lawyer, Joseph Mueller. Mueller already flew back and forth between Rome and Berlin. He'd been doing it for some time, so it didn't raise suspicions when he started doing it. The conspirators inside of Germany were worried about, but we're trying to get more people to join in with them. One of the things that Riebling talks about is a lot of Catholics weren't sure about a plot to assassinate somebody and whether that would be acceptable under Catholic theology. So they asked Mueller to fly to Rome to try to get the blessing of the Pope for this. And the Pope, in essence, and Riebling goes through the theology of it, why it was appropriate in that scenario to topple Hitler, even if it meant killing Hitler, sent the message back, which was then used to encourage more people to join in the conspiracies. There were several conspiracies, as you probably know, several attempts, I should say, as you probably know, to kill him. They were, this issue was done, there's a Pope versus Hitler National Geographic TV special. I got to be one of the talking heads on that, where they go through this whole thing. It's all good until the very end. Then they kind of disrespect Pius XII, I think, at the end too much. But this Riebling's book helps you understand. And part of his argument is people always say Pius XII wasn't using the bully pulpit to condemn and speak and trash Hitler the way he could have. He says he was engaged in an effort to kill him, to oust him and kill him. And taking the bully pulpit would have been inconsistent with that, would have made that more difficult. And the conspirators did not want him to do that. So he was engaged in this large conspiracy, which, everybody recognizes Bonhoeffer's place in that. Mueller, by the way, came within minutes of getting executed. You probably can find that TV special online or somewhere. I think it's a two-parter. But it depicts how close Mueller came to getting executed by the Nazis. So anyway, this is a big part of the equation that people don't even know about. A lot of people don't know about. Pius XII was engaged in the conspiracy to overthrow and kill Hitler. What's a little bit better known about is he sent warnings to the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg before the Nazi invasion. This is kind of fascinating because there's no record of this in Rome, at least under the old archives. Maybe there's something in newly open archives I haven't checked yet. But there was nothing that we could find in Rome. But there is in England. They got the messages in the English archives, British archives, where the Pope says, hey, the Nazis are going to come into the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and be prepared. And the leaders in England are looking at it going, is this good information? We don't know. Didn't really do much because they didn't think this really could happen, but it did. And by the date stamps and stuff, Pius XII warned the Allies 10 days before the invasion of the Low Countries by the Germans. They didn't take advantage of it. They didn't know whether to trust it. I don't know what, whether they could have done much, but man, an enormous breach of neutrality by the Pope, right? A Pope who allegedly favored the Germans or something. I mean, it makes no sense. This message, by the way, also, by all indications, Pius XII did it entirely on his own. He did not engage his underlings in it because this was something that would have gotten someone executed if they were caught doing it. In fact, John Cornwell in the book Hitler's Pope calls Pius XII reckless in being so dangerous, taking this terrible risk in doing this thing, which any chance to criticize him, Cornwell isn't going to miss. Afterwards, by the way, Pius XII sent open telegrams to the leaders of these nations, commiserating with them, promising them that a better day would come in the future and they would not always be under the thumb of Germany, basically. I mean, again, totally inconsistent with what the image you get from some other approaches, some other books. Christmas Day, 1941, New York Times, lead editorial. The voice of Pius XII is a lonely voice in the silence and darkness enveloping Europe this Christmas. The Pope put himself squarely against Hitlerism. 42, August, Vichy seizes Jews, Pope Pius ignored. Yeah, this is a story from the Commonweal, which did not used to be. Today it's a pretty far left Catholic magazine, I think, but didn't used to be quite that much. But this was praised for Pius XII because under him, when Jewish scholars were fired from their post by Nazi officials who wouldn't hire them, the Vatican hired them. They hired when the racial laws came into Italy, the Vatican hired the folks who lost their jobs. 1942. This is kind of interesting. I went into Spellman Archives at Dunwoody Seminary, just north of Manhattan, and looked at the communication between Cardinal Spellman and Rome regarding this 1942 statement, because whereas Pius XII did not use the bully pulpit to condemn repeatedly the Nazis or Hitler, the American bishops came out with this very strong statement. It's like 2 newspaper pages long, where it references Pius XII 3 or 4 times in directly pointing at Hitler, directly talking about persecution of the Jews. You can see a deep sense of revulsion against the cruel indignation heaped upon the Jews in conquered countries. Cannot too strongly condemn the inhuman treatment to which Jewish people have been subjected in many countries. Spellman and Pacelli, I mean, Spellman writes back saying, thank you for your collaboration in putting the statement together. And so if I had students here, I'd be asking them, how come the American bishops make this statement and the Vatican doesn't? And if we were in a different format, I'd probably ask you. I won't make you do it here online like this. But I look for 2 things. Number one, most places, if you make this kind of a statement, including Pius XII, you make this kind of a statement, number one, it's going to get shut down. We saw what happened with brennender Sorge. I mean, it got closed down immediately. It didn't have much impact. In America, you don't have that. The statement was made and so it had impact. Number 2, retaliation. American bishops were not going to be retaliated against. Many places where Nazi occupation took place, a churchman stepped out of line at all, there's retaliation usually not against that person, usually against the underling. So a bishop speaks out, the priests get persecuted. Priest speaks out, lay people get persecuted. That's the way they did it. Pope speaks out, presumably his bishops might get it. Pius, however, was not entirely silent. His 1942 Christmas statement spoke about hundreds of thousands who, through no fault of their own, solely because of their nation or race, were condemned to death or progressive extinction. And, you know, today they'll say, he didn't say Jews, he didn't say Hitler. He actually used the term stirpes that in Vatican talk had long meant Jews. Everybody at the time knew he was talking about the Jews. He didn't technically say the word Jewish. But the New York Times knew. New York Times editorial just after that, this Christmas more than ever, he's a lonely voice crying out of the silence of the continent. And here's something else to think about. At Dachau alone, about 2,000 Polish priests died. Not Catholics, priests, about 2,000. And the thing that I point out is people say, well, he didn't complain. He didn't say anything about the Jewish victims in the concentration camps because he didn't care, because he's an anti-Semite, because he was afraid of Hitler, because he liked Hitler, because he was worried about retaliation of the church, because he was looking for centralization of power of the church. I mean, there's a litany of different things that they argue, that they say why he didn't do anything. But it's all that some bad motivation, right? Except he didn't say anything about it didn't do anything different with the Catholic priests either. I mean, he dealt with Catholic priests the same way he dealt with Jewish paupers. It's not like he's complaining and moaning and all kinds of objections about the priests, but ignoring the Jews. He did what he thought was right both times. There were all kinds of diplomatic interventions. There were protests, there were statements that everybody who wanted to know understood where they were. If we saw extreme difference between how he treated priests and Jews, you could say maybe that suggested something, but you don't. Certainly he didn't want 2,000 Catholic priests to die at Dachau. He approached that problem the same way he approached the problem of the Jewish people in the concentration camps. You can argue whether it's right or wrong. I mean, that's fair enough. Have that debate, have that discussion. Should he have been more confrontational? Might that have helped? I think there's a strong argument it would not have helped, but and I don't begrudge people having that argument. But if he treats Catholic priests the same way he treats Jewish paupers, don't suggest that there's some evil motivation there. One of the things that the church was very well known for was handing out false identity papers, because the Nazis required you to have, papers to show essentially that you were Christian. And one of the great things with this was in the Concordat. I said earlier that it came back to be helpful in some ways. The Concordat said that Germany would recognize anyone baptized as a Catholic. And because of that, Catholic baptismal certificates could often be used to avoid deportation. And there are different stories about, where the people actually got baptized and got certificates, or they were just handing them out right and left. And I think it probably happened different ways in different places. I know when near the end of the war, there's records of a church in Hungary where they had averaged about 2 or 3 baptismal certificate conversion, adult baptismal certificates, 2 or 3 a year for decades. And the Nazis come in. The first month they've got like 12, and the second month they've got 30, and the third month they've got 300. And until the Nazis figured it out, then they stopped it. But there's a tremendous growth because the church was cooperating, trying to help Jewish people avoid deportation and persecution. The future John the 23rd was particularly noted for handing out a lot of baptismal certificates. The story, and I probably should have had the slide up about Edith Stein. Edith Stein was a girl who grew up in a Jewish family, although they were not very practicing. She went to college and studied theology. She was drawn to Christianity, ultimately drawn to Catholicism, and became a nun. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross is the name she took. And she was in Germany, and when the Nazis came to power, her order sent her to Holland. When the Nazis came there, the Catholic leaders and the Protestant leaders got together, and they went to the Nazis and said, we're going to issue a statement condemning what you do. The Nazis said, you better not. If you do, you're going to regret it. It's going to be really bad for you if you issue a statement. The Protestant leaders did not issue that statement. The Catholic bishops went ahead and issued the statements. Goebbels comes back. They posted statements like this. I mean, there were signs. It was not just, this isn't an after the fact instruction. Goebbels says, if the Catholic clergy can thus ignore negotiations, we in turn are forced to consider the Catholic full-blooded Jews, in other words, a Jewish person with a baptismal certificate, as our worst opponents, and to take measures to ship them off to the East as quickly as possible. Edith Stein, Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, was shipped off to a concentration camp. She died, in their different accounts, either there or on the way there. It's one of the things where you ask, so what did the statement accomplish? Did it make things better or make things worse? It looks on the surface like it made things worse. Again, you can argue, I mean, maybe whatever, but if the statement had not been made, Edith Stein might never have been deported. This is the kind of report that got back to Rome, and when Pius XII was trying to figure out what to do. I'd always heard that Pius XII got a report from Holland when he was on the verge of making a profound statement about persecution of the Jews, and then he took the paper and tore it up, or he put it in the fire and burned it. And I didn't know if that was true. I mean, it sounds kind of dramatic, right? And then I was in Rome years ago, and I was looking over testimonies. This is actually when I was writing the first edition of Hitler, the War and the Pope. I was looking over testimonies. I found 3 witnesses who testified under oath. They were there, and they saw him take the paper and burn it up. So I believe that, in fact, happened. That's the word that's coming back to him. There's another case like this in Poland. He sent a statement into the bishop in Poland, in Warsaw, encouraging him to make this profound statement. And the bishop sent it back with a note, said, thank you for your prayers and your thoughts. We're not going to read the statement. It'll get people killed. That's what Pius XII is hearing in Rome. That's what he's seeing. There was a point in time, of course, where Hitler double crosses Stalin, breaks up this happy wedding. He invades the Soviet Union. There's an audio tape, the Great Courses. There's an audio tape. A professor at Notre Dame recorded the audios, Popes and the Papacy, a history. And he said Pius XII blessed Hitler's crusade into the godless Soviet Union. I looked up every place I could look up. And finally, I contacted the professor and I asked him what his source was for that. And he came back and he did not have a good source, and he apologized to me. I mean, that statement, if you ever listen to the Popes and the Papacy, statements out there, I guess, but the author acknowledges now it was not. In fact, there had been some priests who had done this, or actually requested a blessing from the Pope. And the Pope says no, he declined. He refused to bless Hitler's crusade into the Soviet Union. Not that he really liked the Soviet Union, but he wasn't going to bless Hitler. In 1943, Hitler gets word that Mussolini's been toppled. And by all accounts, he's driving in a limousine. He gets the word, he hears it on the radio, and he says, the Pope was behind this. And he decides he's got to occupy his ally. Italy is his ally. He decides to occupy northern Italy. He sends troops in there. The Vatican is, of course, a separate country, and it's neutral. And there's a white line on the ground, and the soldiers I mean, while they were there, and this was very debated whether they would do it in high Nazi circles, but they did not invade the Vatican. The Vatican and church properties became a safe haven for Allied soldiers down behind enemy lines, AWOL German soldiers, or other Jews or other victims of the Nazis who needed to hide out somewhere. And there was, so I always kind of do this. You think of my head as the dome of St. Peter's, and the two arms coming out. There's a white line around outside that, and you've got Nazis with submachine guns on one side, and you've got the Swiss guards with their pikes on the other side. And that was the reality. And the people inside were quite certain that the Nazis eventually would invade. There was a sort of a dark joke that went around about Hermann Goering, who was a very flamboyant dresser. He'd been at World War I ace, and kind of a large man, got a healthy build like me. And he was known for dressing pretty flamboyantly. And they said the joke from inside the Vatican was that a telegram gets sent to Berlin from him, and it says, Pope has been captured. St. Peter's is in flames. I look wonderful in these robes. It's hard telling a joke when you can't hear if anybody's laughing. So I hope some of you are. Here's an Austrian nun. In these painful situations, the Holy Father wishes us to save his children, also the Jews, and he orders that in the monasteries, hospitality be given to these persecuted people, and even the cloisters have to adhere to the desire of the High Pontiff. They broke rules of cloister. They allowed sometimes married Jewish couples to be in back and forth. I talked to an elderly priest. I probably talked to him 20 years ago now. So I don't know that he's around anymore, but
What?
he had been in seminary. He'd been in seminary.
I told you, right
Okay, just a minute.
He'd been in seminary when this all took place, and he talked about how
Spinal.
they had so little food.
Yeah.
Please mute your voices there, please. Please mute. Sorry, Professor, go ahead.
So he said they had so little food, and then they got the order from the Vatican to take in 100 more people, and there was pain in this guy's voice, thinking back, 50 years earlier, of how tough it had been to share what little they had with the groups. And there's some fascinating stories too, because they would teach, especially kids.
Hey, back to your taxes. The standard deduction for two this year is 27,000.
Hold on a minute, Professor. Can you go ahead and mute them, Denny, please? Mute everyone.
Well, that was last year.
I was on the
Mr. Everest, can you mute, please? Not interested in your taxes right now, sir.
Well, I mean,
tell me what it is now when they compared the two.
yeah, I'm sure they know. It's in their program. It's automatic.
There's no way.
Mr. Everest.
19 numbers in there.
Well, I don't know. They keep them. I think Turbo.
No, I mean, if you're going to offer me to do my taxes in 20.
Maybe we get some
As
good
you can
advice.
see, we still have our problems too.
So I teach classes. I know.
I apologize. All right, please go
I was
ahead.
teaching class the other day, and some guy's dog was getting after a chicken. That's I live in Mississippi. There's some stories. They would pass people off as being Catholic, but they would try to provide, when they could, kosher food and the opportunity to carry out Jewish ceremonies. And there's stories of folks engaged in a Jewish ceremony, and a knocks on the door, and they break into singing the Ave Maria, because you don't know if it's going to be a Nazi soldier. There's a movie about this, Gregory Peck, The Scarlet and the Black, where he plays Monsignor Hugh O'Flaherty, Jewish priest. It's based on a true story, who he sheltered not only Jews, downed airmen, but Jews as well. And then a lot of people overlook that. When the Nazis moved in, they went to the Jewish community in Rome, and they demanded 50 kilograms of gold within 36 hours
Yeah,
to avoid deportation.
sure.
And it turned out it was sort of a trap, sort of a trick. Try to get the gold from the Jews, and then they're going to deport them anyway. That's what they did.
Yeah.
O'Flaherty, I always thought he was lucky to get played, because he really should have been played by Carl Malden, right? And this is what he really looks. That's the real priest. But he was a true hero. Saved a lot of people's lives by hiding them from the Nazis when they came in. I was talking earlier about St. Peter's Basilica. I got to go up in the shoulder part over here. This is right where the papal apartment is, and they were showing me where the Nazi soldiers stood, and it was really close to that apartment. I mean, it's a scary kind of thing. Well, the Pope oversaw a tremendous rescue operation. These are loaves of bread that are going to be taken across Rome in trucks like this to starving people and children, and burned and bombed out buildings like this where nuns and priests would feed them. And you look at that line going way back there. And this is, in fact, the papal bedroom at Castel Gandolfo. This is Castel Gandolfo. It turned into a place, according to U.S. record. Actually, it was a report from Rome back to Washington, D.C. Up to 12,000 refugees were staying at Castel Gandolfo over the course of the war. They're sleeping not only on the floor all over the place, they're sleeping up and down staircases. This is taken at Castel Gandolfo. I mean, the place is just crammed with refugees. That's actually the language of the report from Rome. 40 children were born in the papal bedroom apartment place. They converted it into a birthing nursing area. So 40 children were born in Castel Gandolfo at the time. I've got a correspondent we're trying to track down more information on it. The Vatican didn't really keep records, I mean, whether they're Jewish, whether they're whatever they are, because anybody in need got help. You didn't ask what their background was. In 43, also, there was the roundup, the famous roundup, where they took about 1,200 Jews, rounded them up, sent them off. The Pope got about 200 of them released, but of the roughly 1,000 who got shipped away, only 16 survived the war. And that's one of the criticisms. Also, some people say the Pope didn't do enough. Could he, should he have done more? There are 3 separate interventions the Pope engaged in trying to get this stopped. Like I said, he got about 200 people released. And after that first one, there never again were any other major roundups in Rome. But, they didn't protect everybody. Although, frankly, Rome, they did much better than almost any other major city that the Nazis occupied. When Hitler was encouraged to invade the Vatican, this is actually the notes from his table talks where he's talking. Carlos Wolff, a German general, got the orders, draw up plans to help us invade the Vatican. And Wolff didn't want to, and he convinced Hitler not to do it by saying it'll be impossible to maintain our occupation because the Italians will go crazy if we invade the Vatican. And so he convinced Hitler not to, but Hitler said this: we're going to do it afterwards. Okay, we're not going to do it, and we won't do it now. But as soon as the war's over, we'll go over, go in and do it. After the liberation of Rome, New York Times editorial: under the Pope's direction, the Holy See did an exemplary job of sheltering and championing the victims of the Nazi fascist regime. Spoken to dozens of Italians, both Catholics and Jews, who owe their liberty and perhaps their lives to the protection of the Church. Pius XII said upon the liberation of Rome: for centuries, Jews have been unjustly treated and despised. It is time they were treated with justice and humanity. God wills it and the Church wills it. St. Paul tells us that the Jews are our brothers. They should also be welcomed as friends. August 3rd, 44, FDR writes to the Pope, should like to take this occasion to express to His Holiness my deeply felt appreciation of the frequent action which the Holy See has taken to render assistance to the victims of racial and religious persecution. Racial and religious persecution, everyone understood, meant the Jews. Time magazine editorial. The Church Apostolic, through the encyclicals and other papal pronouncements, has been fighting totalitarianism more knowingly, devoutly, and authoritatively than any other organized power. December 1945, a lot of Jewish groups come to thank the Pope for all he has done. Rabbi Israel Zoli was the chief rabbi of Rome prior to the war. During the occupation, he took shelter at the Vatican. After the occupation, after the liberation, he converted and became a Catholic. He said he did not do it in tribute or thanks to the church. He had a vision of Jesus and it was an honest religious conversion. However, he took Eugenio as his Christian name in honor and thanks to the Pope for all the Pope did to save Jewish people during the, in the war. So it's the chief rabbi of Rome. And in fact, the Museum of Liberation, the Rome, after World War II, the Jewish community of Rome put up this plaque. And it took forever to find this picture because somehow it's disappeared. But it was a plaque that was put up thanking him, thanking the Pope, thanking the church for all they had done to save Jews during the occupation, during the war. Chief Rabbi of Palestine, father of the future president of Israel. The people of Israel will never forget what His Holiness and his illustrious delegates are doing for us unfortunate brothers and sisters in this most tragic hour of our history. Pinchas Lapid, an Israeli diplomat, spent, I want to say, 16 months studying in the archives at Yad Vashem, Israel's Holocaust Authority. And he concluded that originally that the church had saved 750,000 Jews. He later revised that to 860,000 Jews, more than any other church, religious institution, etc., more than all of them put together, the Catholic Church had saved. After the war, dignitaries from all around the world came to visit Pope Pius XII. One time he kept the future John the 23rd waiting for 90 minutes while he met with his favorite movie actor, Clark Gable, who came to visit him. Yogi Berra came to visit him. I guess he was a player. There was a player, Ducky Medwick, St. Louis Cardinals player, kind of gave away the joke there because he said, Holy Father, we have something in common. We both used to be Cardinals. Although my favorite one, there was an American diplomat who had known the Pope back in Germany when they were representatives of their separate countries, American and from the Vatican, and said, Holy Father, I guess we weren't very good representatives of our countries. And the Pope goes, what do you mean? So, well, I wrote back to Washington, I think you wrote back to Rome, that this guy Hitler was never going to amount to anything. And Pope goes, you must remember, back then I was not infallible.
Professor, we're getting close to wrap-up time. Have you got much longer? I would like some folks to ask questions if they can.
Sure. Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll just go through. Let's see if there's anything real. Oh, just some of the abuse. Okay. Here's the picture they all use on the cover of Hitler's Pope, and it gets doctored, blurred, doctored, everything. They put it on the cover there. Little stuff on mine. Oh, and this quote. I'll show this quote. This is inside the cover of Hitler's Pope. Pius XII and Jews, the whole thing is too sad and too serious for bitterness. The silence, which is deeply in complicity, completely in complicity with all the forces. Thomas Merton, contemplative monk, wrote that. He wrote that about an essay about nuclear war that he had written that was not allowed to publish. And he wrote this, and John Cornwell took the parts that are red, linked them together with ellipses, and committed academic fraud. It's appalling, the kind of stuff that happened. Mistranslations. This is Pacelli. This is the guy I met who we talked about at the beginning of the thing. Pius XII said, if only peace could be had by the crying of peace, peace. But no, it took more than that. No individual did more than him. Everyone at the time knew it. The rescuers cited him as their inspiration. The victims thanked him, and the Nazis despised him. They're the people we need to be listening to when it comes to this. I appreciate you listening to me. So with that, I will stop the share and get back here.
Professor, that was outstanding. And I think everybody enjoyed that. Boy, I'll tell you, unbelievable. And I think what's relevant at today, the concept of misinformation, look how effective it can be. Today, we have to battle that. It's unbelievable. All right, I have a question. I see, Bob, is that your hand up? Nope. Who's got a question?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. James, go ahead. Jim Days, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question about a book I read about 20 years ago, favorable to Pius XII, but it mentions or goes into this issue of the peace efforts. And it actually says that during the phony war phase, Pius XII was involved in opening up diplomatic channels between the German High Command and the French and the English to overthrow Hitler and end the war before the invasion of France. Do you have any evidence that that actually took place?
I'm more aware of his efforts after the war, during that. And I will say this, he gets some criticism that perhaps, I mean, if you think it's critical, it might be deserved. I mean, he seemed to be willing to go to whatever length to try to avoid war. He understood the horror that the war was going to bring. So I don't know that what you're asking about specifically. I can see it as a possibility, though. I don't reject it off the top of my head.
One other thing, there's some old war stories that I have heard from my uncle and I'd like to share with you. Would you leave us your email?
Absolutely. I'll put it in the chat box if you want.
Thank you.
Don, did I see your hand raised?
Yes, sir.
Okay, please.
Ron, you mentioned John Cornwell with his treatment of the plan with General Wolfe and the idea of coming in and taking over the Vatican and kidnapping Pius XII. I don't put any credibility on John Cornwell, but Dan Kurtzman wrote a book about the same issue and put a lot of credibility in what General Wolfe had said. What's your perspective on those two different references on the same issue? Is my question clear?
I mean, I know what I mean, I think Cornwell just did not believe the testimony of Wolfe. Kurtzman did. I knew Kurtzman passed away now, but I knew Kurtzman. I quote at rather some significant length. I quote Wolfe's testimony, and I did that before Kurtzman's. I should have made a whole book out of just that because that's what Kurtzman did. But yeah. It's a great story, and I believe it's true. If you want to criticize it, I mean, the testimony, someone could question the credibility of Wolfe. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Do you question the credibility of Wolfe? And there's opportunity for him perhaps to have tried to make himself look better than he really deserved to. I mean, I can't rule that out. I've read his testimony. I didn't get to cross-examine. In fact, he wasn't cross-examined. It's just having a direct testimony. So I don't know that there's reason to doubt it. I will say this: Father Peter Gumpel, who's the former judge in the sainthood cause for Pius XII, knew Wolfe, and he thought highly of Wolfe. Mm-hmm. So I'm inclined
with that, I want to thank you very much, Professor. It was amazing. Clearly, an hour is not enough, especially we got a late start.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Love to have you back. It long.
No, it was excellent. In fact, I would love to have you come back and I'd like to hear more about Blind Spot, one of my favorite movies. But having said that, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day and weekend. And we will be distributing your books to all of our friars here. And I think it'll be excellent reading, especially with the background you provided. And I understand you're going to sign those books. Is that correct?
I
Just nod your
will.
head yes.
Sure.
All right. Thank you,
Okay.
Ron. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Hey,
Bye.
yes, very good. Okay, folks, before we go, two real quick things. One, as mentioned, we are going to have the purchase the books and have them distributed. What we usually do, we'll have them received by John Ost, past President John Ost, and you'll swing by and pick up the signed book there. And having said that, that's one of the reasons why your board got together and discussed the reduction of our dues since we're not having meals, but we're only going to go from $125 to $100. So there will be a reduction, but this is where that money goes to, so we can purchase these books from top quality speakers. So we usually get them autographed, and we'll have them, we'll get them available for everyone. Just let us know if you have a problem getting, if you're ambulatory, you can't get out. Of course, right now it's pretty rough with COVID, but they will be at John Ost's office, centrally located in Orange, right off the plaza there. I think it's 100 or 200 West or East Chapman, the north side. So with that, unless there's any burning questions right now, well, have an amazing day and weekend. Stay healthy, and we will see you next month. And directors, we will see you next week on the 12th at 1 p.m. 1 p.m., not 11. All right, very good. Thank you, and have a blessed day. Oh, let's close a prayer. Who do we got here? Let's go with who's feeling particularly spiritual today. I know Ron always does a good job. Ron, can you, Klusker, can you do a closing prayer, please? Somebody wake up Ron. There he is.
All right. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Hey, Father, thank you for letting us have this special guest speaker today, talking to us and informing us, and also to be with us and all of our families in this time of need. And we'll end with our Father. Our Father,
Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.
Thy will be done on earth
as it is in heaven.
Give us
Give us
this day our daily bread, and
and
forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. All right, gentlemen and ladies, thank you. I think you just got a good lesson in history. I'm a history fanatic anyway, and I love that era. So you just got a real good insight to some well done research. So thank you again, Professor Ron. Good job.
Amen.
And who would have thought? Ole Miss, huh? All righty. Take care, guys
Bye
and
now.
gals.